Hello, welcome back everyone to the Joy of Code. It's episode 32 and we will continue where we left off last time. We were doing our breakout game and we were looking at loops last time. Today I will do something that just reinforces what we've done before, and that is a bit more loops. I know the next natural thing now would be to do the collision detection, to have the ball actually knock out the blocks, and we will do that next time. Before I do that though, I want to do something that is purely decorative, and that's just, do a bit of paint a pattern on the background. For two reasons. First of all, it looks nice, it looks a bit more interesting, but the real reason is that I think we need a little bit more practice with loops before we move on to new materials. So this gives us a chance to practice again to write a while loop before we move on to new material. So let's do that first, and I'll show you what we'll do. So here we are with the breakout scenario as we left it off last time. Just to remind you, we can here bounce a ball across the screen, and we have the blocks at the top, but there's no interaction yet between the ball and the block, so it just flies straight over it. But today, let's look at the background. I think this background image here, this just one colored gradient, is a bit too boring. So what we want to do today is we want to draw a pattern on the background purely as a decorative thing to make it look a bit nicer. And what I'm going to do is I will paint a number of circles on the background, just maybe 30 or 50 or 100 circles in different colors, just to make it look a bit more interesting. The background is the image of our world class. A board here is the object that represents the whole world. And so here, if we go into the board class, there we have the class that should do the painting, because the board can paint on its own background. So we'll start off. What I just said is I want a certain number, say 50 circles, painted on the background. We start off by making ourselves a method to draw a single circle, and then later we can just draw the call that method in a loop 50 times. So here I make myself a method public void draw circle, and at the moment I make that public because you will see that in a minute I want to call that from the outside just for testing purposes. So I call it draw circle, and I don't give it any parameter specifying what this circle should look like, because I will make that completely random. So I just say something, draw a circle with random, that is a spelling error, size and color. So here, I can draw a circle by getting the background image of the world. And remember, here I am in the world subclass, so I have the methods available to get my background image. I can say get, and I hit Control space here for my code completion. See, there's a method called get background that says here returns the world's background image. That gives me my background image, and I can get that so that I can paint on it. And that gives me back here, it tells me a result of type Greenfoot image, so I can store it in a Greenfoot image variable. So that's what I'm going to use. I do get background, and then I store that in a variable called image of type Greenfoot image. This draw circle method I will now develop fairly quickly, and I will go over the do not explain it in very much detail because it's repetition of material that we have covered before in earlier episodes. So if this is a bit unclear to you, go back to where we had the colored bouncing balls scenario. That is quite similar. So I'm getting my background image. Now I can draw on it by just drawing on the image. I can say image dot draw, and then see what I have. If I want to draw a circle, there is no draw circle method, but there is a draw oval method, and drawing the draw oval method allows me to draw circles as well, because I can specify the x and y coordinate, that is where I draw my oval, and then the width and the height of the oval. And just by making the width and the height the same, I will get a circle. So I can say draw oval, and then I have to specify the position where I want to draw it and the size, how big I want it, and that I all want to make random. So here I put in a few calls to get random values for the position and the color and the size. So first let's do the position. I say my X position, I want Greenfoot dot get random number, and then the X position should be a random number between 0 and then the right edge of the world. The right edge of the world I can just call get width. Get width, that returns the width of the world. So here if I call get width, that gives me a perfect upper bound for my X coordinate. And then I do the same with the Y coordinate. I say I get a get random number with get height, and there's a spelling error here. So that is a random number. Then I want a random color. Colors are specified by specifying RGB values. That is a red, green, blue component. So I get all those randomly as well. So I get variables that I call RGB, which means red, green, blue. I will call them RGB in single letters because it's a very common expression to just talk about color values as RGB values. So RGB in the context of colors is actually meaningful. I said once before you should give your variables meaningful names, but RGB is meaningful. So I say Greenfoot dot get random number, and RGB values are always bounded as 256. So they are out in the value range 0 to 255. And I just copy that a few times and say I do an random R, G, and B value. Then I can create a color variable, and the type color is not known in Greenfoot. I have to import it. I have to say import java.awt.color to get my color type, and then I can use a variable of type color here, and I just say I want a new color, and I specify the RGB values using my 3 variables that I have, and then the fourth variable is the alpha value. That is how transparent it is, and I want that fairly transparent, so we can play with that later. I just make that 20, and I'll show you in a moment what the effect of that 20 is. That the transparency value is, how solid or how transparent, how see-through it appears. So this gives me a color with a random hue, so that is a random color value, and a fairly transparent one. And then I say image.set color, which means, oops, I'm using this color that I just specified as my drawing color, and then I draw here at my X and Y position. That is my random X and Y variable here. I draw something. Oh, the width and height. I want the size random as well. So I say int size equals, and I do the same again. I get a random number. How big do I want to make it? Let's say I make it up to 100. But then again, this now would give me a size between 0 and 100. I don't want really small ones. Let's say I want them to be at least 50 pixels big. So I just add 50 here. That gives me then altogether a random value between 50 and 150. So then I have a variable random size here. So I can here use size and size as my width and height of the oval, which gives me a random sized circle. Okay, let's try that out. This should give me a circle drawn at a random location with a random color and a random size. If I compile this method, remember, is not being called yet, so I'm not getting a circle here yet. But because I made it public, if I right click on the background, I can see my draw circle method here, and I can call it interactively and try it out. So if I do that, this didn't seem to do anything. Let's do that again. Draw circle. Oh, I see. There is very faintly, I don't know whether you can see that on the video. There is very faintly here an outline of a circle being drawn. it's almost not visible because only the border of the circle is drawn and not the whole circle itself, and that is because I used draw oval. What I actually meant to do is doing a fill oval, which will draw oval draws only the outline, fill oval fills the whole circle with that color. So I've changed that to fill oval. Try that again. See a draw circle, and there is one. I do that again. There's another one, and there's another one, and there's another one. And see, they are all fairly faint because I have a fairly high transparency set. And we can experiment with that in a minute. But we can see now this works. Now I want to make a new method, and that is the one I want to concentrate on because that's where we are going to loop, to use a loop. This is a method now that will not draw not one circle, but draw a whole number of circles. So I also make that public first, void draw random circles. Oops, sorry, I meant to go here. Random circles. So draw random circles. And I want to make a parameter that allows me to specify how many circles we want to draw. So here I want to then draw a number of circles. Actually, we can just call this method automatically already. Here is the constructor of the board. If in the constructor, after creating the blocks, I call this method here, and I say here, oops, I pressed the wrong button again. What I meant to do is just select this and write in there, say 50 for I'm drawing 50 circles. So here I'm saying give me 50 random circles, and here's my method that takes as a parameter how many circles I want, and that now needs to make it happen. So the purpose or the task of this method now is to call the draw circle method 50 times, or again exactly this many times, whatever the parameter specifies. And I said before we will use a while loop again to do this. Java has several kinds of loops. It also has another loop, a for loop, that we haven't seen yet, that we could also use for this. But we will do that a bit later. For now, we will just concentrate on the one type of loop that we know, that is the while loop, and use this one. So if we want now a while loop, I want to say while, and then some condition, and then have a body here. In the body, I want to call the draw circle method. So I want to say here, draw a circle. This will draw one circle. And so now if I can make it so that this while loop goes around exactly 50 times, I will get 50 circles. I do that by declaring a loop counter. A loop counter is just an integer variable that I will do for counting. That is, the idea is that while I go through the while loop, I just count how many times I've been through. So every time I go through, I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and when I'm at 50, I stop. And counting numbers I can do with an integer variable. Now it's traditional in computing to call a loop counter variable I. Now I said before, use descriptive names for variables. In programming, the variable name I has meaning. If you see a variable called I, it is used for counting in a loop. A loop counter is traditionally called I. You should never use the variable name I for anything else, because that is a convention that a loop counter is called I. And we start at 0. So we make that loop counter start at 0. And then I say here, while I is less than 50, I go into the loop, I draw the circle, and then, very important, I have to remember to count up the loop counter. So here I say I is assigned I plus 1. So here that means I'm incrementing my loop counter by 1. So I'm reading out I add 1. So at first time I read out the 0, I add 1, which makes it 1, and then I'm writing it back into my variable. So first time round, I will be 0, next time it will be 1, next time it will be 2, next time it will be 3. And as long as it's still under 50, I will go into my loop, draw the circle, and we get 50 circles. It is exactly 50, and notice here I said while I is less than 50, not less or equal. So when I is equal to 50, we stop. And that will give us 50 circles because we are starting at 0. So essentially we are counting from 0 to 49, which is 50 iterations. Actually, I have so far ignored this parameter here. I'm always drawing 50. I need to fix that in a moment. But before fixing that, let's try that out. So I compile this, and I'm getting here 50 random circles. And this now looks sort of nice. So if I do that again, I get 50 different circles. And every time I start this, every time I reset this, I get different looking circles because they're really random. So that seems to be working. Now, actually, I'm ignoring this parameter. I'm passing in here. I say I want 50 circles. That gets passed into how many, and then it gets ignored, and I always draw my 50 circles. And of course, I shouldn't say 50 here. I should use this, and I'm copying this here, this parameter as my upper bound, because that specifies really how many circles I want. And now I'm using the parameter instead of just writing 50. And if I compile that now, it has exactly the same effect. But the effect now is that I can specify here how many I want. So if I now say I want 300 circles and I compile this, I get lots of circles and I get a very different effect. If I say I want only 10 circles, it will look like this. So depending on what you think looks nicer, you can play with that number. I can really fill it up and say, give me 400 circles, and make it, get an image like this. Let's say I think I want fewer. I want 20 circles. And then it looks like this. We can also now see the effect of the alpha value. So here I had picked out a number out of the head 20 for the alpha value. If I say 255, then I make it completely solid, the color. So if you look at this now, then the circles look like this. They get completely solid looking color. If I say 128, that is halfway, then they are sort of half transparent and they look like this. And I think this is still too strong because it detracts too much from the blocks and the ball. So if I play this now, the ball doesn't stand out enough from the background. I want the background to fade a bit more. And so here I use a small value, which means it makes the colors mostly transparent, so fairly transparent. And then I get these sort of pastel looking colors that fade into the background and that make a nice background. Okay, that's it for today. Play with the parameters, with the size and the alpha value and the number of the circles until you get a background that you like. You can of course also make the width and the height of the circle different if you want to, then you get ovals of different shapes and sizes. But the important thing that I really want you to remember from the session today is the while loop. This is a very common pattern for doing something a fixed number of times. So the fixed number of times is specified here in this parameter how many. So if that how many, say, is 20, then I'm doing this 20 times. And the pattern looks like this. We have a while loop. Before the while loop, we create a variable for a loop counter. It is always of type int and usually starts at 0. And then we have a condition in the while loop that compares the loop counter with a less than equal to the number of times we want to do it. So we are saying while the loop counter is still less than the number of times we want to go around, then we do our thing, and whatever we do here, that changes depending on the context. And then I have to increment the loop counter by 1. And that is very important to remember, to increment the loop counter. If you forget this, this loop would go around forever and ever and ever and ever and never return. That would be an infinite loop and a very common programming error. Okay, try to write this loop. Experiment a bit with the actual values, but memorizing this pattern, integer loop counter, while loop, with this condition and incrementing the loop counter. That is a very, very important, very common programming pattern that we will encounter later again. And that's it for today. Have fun. Bye bye.